Welcome back to the Business That Matters Spotlight. My name is Warren Coughlin, your host. Lots of people say they want to have an impact, but when you're part of a large organization, it can be kind of tough to figure out what to do, how to do it, who do you go through to get it done. So imagine being called by these organizations to help them actually come up with ideas, develop those ideas, implement those ideas to do something good in the world. How great would it feel to have your fingerprints on a big, wide range of high impact initiatives in a bunch of different organizations? Well, that's sort of the life of today's guest. And he started doing this long before all the cool kids got in the game. And he's written a book about how you too can make a difference. So please welcome Paul Klein of Impact Corp. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Warren. Pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Now, I do something here on the podcast that's a little bit different because I recognize not everybody can hang out for the entirety of a podcast. So I always like to ask people for one tip or idea for, an entrepreneur who wants to make some impact with their business, but still has to deal with the actual running of the business. Any idea you'd like to share?
Well, I think it starts, like everything else, anyone in business, you've got to be helping someone solve a problem. Like someone actually has to have a problem that you can help solve. And so it starts there. And if you can't understand and articulate that, not going anywhere.
Good point. Yes, it's actually funny, the number of clients who I've come across when I actually ask them, about their business or what's the value they provide, they sort of stumble and they wind up saying, "Can you go do our sales for us?"
Well, and like just sort of building on this, like, we've probably all been in situations where people meet with a potential client and there's no clear problem there. The client doesn't have a problem. You may think that they've got an opportunity. You may get in the course of a conversation kind of, ferreting out something that might be different. But the most basic thing has to happen before that. That person has to have, in order for an entrepreneur to do work, the person has to have identified there's a problem, has to have the budget to actually do something about it, and the timing has to be right. And they've got to be or either themselves or connected to someone who has the authority to make a decision. So if you don't have those four things, you got no business. And whether it's something like I do, or we do, which is helping people, solve social problems in a way that benefits their business, or anything else, the same thing.
So let's shift to that. Like, so how do you define that? Like, even just solving social problems is a big category. So when you say, what is the pain or the problem that you're solving, and who do you solve problems for?
Yeah, so that the in the case, well, there's a few different sort of verticals that we have. One is large corporations, so and the other is and maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, charitable organizations. And this is not including the work of our foundation, which is a separate organization, but in terms of the work Impact does itself. So corporations now have a set of problems and opportunities in the space of social change, which is to say, sort of simply put, that their most important audiences and stakeholders are now expecting something very different from these same corporations than business as usual. So whether you're an employee at a large organization or any organization, arguably, whether you're a shareholder, if you're a customer, if you are a business partner, the bar has been raised. And so the problem is that if corporations are not living up to the expectations of the people that are most important to them, there's a business risk.
And in terms of the who, so there's those verticals, but within the organizations, like, are you working with sort of the intrapreneurs? Are you working at the C-suite? Like, where does the impulse to create an initiative come from?
Yeah, mostly it's at a C-suite level, and that's where those also that range of things that people at that level have to have identified that there's a problem and a related opportunity. They have to have a budget for it. They have to have the need and the timing to do it as well. Yeah, that's our experience, and if we find if it doesn't, because at least for the things that we do, and which are aiming to be transformational. Like the work we do is and there's some tactical aspects of it, but if there's something that isn't sort of an organization that isn't fundamentally interested in being transformational for themselves and for their world at large, it's not the kind of work that we generally do.
And what do you mean by transformational?
Well, fundamentally making a change, both in with respect to a social issue that's relevant to their business, and doing that in a way which is transformational to their business in terms of how to engage how employees are involved and engaged, how customers and consumers know about this, the ways in which they're differentiated from competitors, and so on. So that's just our kind of lane, and there's a lot of things that need to happen that are more tactical, even in this space. It's just not what we do.
So just to put some meat on the bones on that, can you share one or two examples what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going back, this is now a number of years. Like there's lots of different examples. I think one of the first real transformational things that we were associated with was helping Home Depot to really understand and actually sign up for this crazy big challenge of helping to end youth homelessness. And it's something that was originally that started probably 10 years ago now, and they have had the incredible commitment and courage to continue that work. And now I would say like the whole world of homelessness in Canada would be completely different without the work that these people have done since then. And it really is transformational with respect to the issue, and it has been transformational with respect to their own position and place in the minds of the people that matter to them most. And if you
what was the nature of that work? So getting involved in youth homelessness, what did that look like in terms of an initiative? Like, was your work at the level of just choosing which cause to get involved with, or was it getting into this is the kind of program we're going to create? And what did that look like?
Yeah, it started with identifying that this was a big problem that they wanted to help solve. So it was at a strategic level, which their CEO ultimately had to approve that. And then beyond that, we were involved in specific programmatic aspects of that in terms of helping to advise how they were contributing to that, helping to engage youth who've experienced homelessness in this program itself, helping to involve their suppliers and a whole range of other things. And another great example more recently is a couple of years ago now is work we've done with Petro Canada in helping to establish a remarkable organization called the Caremakers Foundation, which is actually a new and separate charitable organization that Petro Canada, we helped them launch, which has a mission to advocate for and create awareness of the importance of family caregivers. And so this is all across Canada in terms of people like you and I, and almost everyone in their lives will have to be a caregiver to someone. And Petro Canada with our help, recognized this was an important gap in the kind of health and social service world in this country. And committed to it to such a degree that they established their own foundation to have a kind of permanent place for doing this important work. So, and that again, like the Home Depot example, in a much shorter period of time, actually, this space that Petro Canada has created in the Caremakers Foundation has become, I would say, the Caremakers Foundation is probably the most significant organization in the country that supports this particular issue, and that's only in the last 3 years. It's amazing. So wow. It just shows you what's possible. But these are not simple things, It's not like the old days of saying, okay, buy a box of cereal and we'll donate 5 cents to something,
Right.
or whatever it is.
So I'm curious, those two examples are really interesting. Like one, the homelessness piece has a thematic connection to the brand itself, right? Like building homelessness.
Mhm.
Caregiving or caremaking is not an obvious connection between oil production or energy production. Like where did that come? Like, was that a passion project of somebody within the organization, or is it something you guys consulted with? Like, how does a nationalized oil company suddenly decide to move into that space?
Well, it really started with looking at who this organization is as their impact on the country and their impact as a brand in the country, in this country. And the fact is that they are one of the most important and I would say ubiquitous brands in the whole country. That it's absolutely everywhere. And so we started thinking about, what are the issues that matter, no matter where you are in this country. If you're Canadian, and this is the same in different countries as well. We happen to be working in the Canadian space in this case. But no matter where you are, doesn't matter if you are in Toronto, in Montreal, if you are a newcomer to Canada, if you're, any population you can imagine will face this issue, will have to be a caregiver at some point. And what we discovered when we looked at it carefully is this most basic thing that in spite of it's something that is going to happen to everybody, but when it does happen, people have no idea what to do.
Mhm.
Don't know what the resources are. They don't know if there's government support for this. They don't know how their employers may or may not have a policy related to this. So it's actually something that affects virtually everybody, but had no in the country, and there was no backbone to it. There's no foundation to actually help. And because this was something that was so important to everyone, and will be to the entire country, Petro Canada actually was a pretty good fit because how many corporations and brands are that iconically Canadian?
Right. I'm fascinated by that. I was actually involved 25 years ago in something called the Caregiver's Journey, and it was an initiative that was meant to help caregivers because it's such an isolating experience that very few people appreciate, even though so many people are involved in it. But it's
Mm,
it's like this ubiquitous but dark secret that people who are caregivers have to suffer in silence without anybody knowing what they endure.
for sure. Well, and something that's, maybe uh, something that's maybe that has maybe a more immediate understanding of the connection is something that we've had the great pleasure of making foods on, which was started a couple of years ago, which was this basic commitment they have to understanding what the future of farming is going to look like. So their immense global agricultural-based food business, and there's a huge amount of priority, of course, now in sustainable farming, regenerative agriculture. How to keep different generations of farmers working on the farm. There's so many important issues now, and at the same time as food security and food insecurity is such a big issue, they committed to this idea of understanding what the future of farming ought to be. And what that has translated into is an incredible initiative that they have launched called Farms of the Future. And so they're literally farms that are set up and there's two that have been set up so far. The first one is in New Brunswick. The second one is in South Africa, where they're innovating new approaches to regenerative agriculture and sustainable farming. And it's just incredible. And so that's and obviously connecting to their business in a more obvious way, I suppose. But again, in both cases, in all three of these cases, I would say these are all corporations that have had, a real commitment to transformation, both for
And
themselves and for these issues.
now some of those, so if you don't mind, I'm fascinated, and people who've listened to this podcast may get where I'm coming from on this. One of the challenges in doing good at sometimes a personal values basis, but also just at a frankly political level, is
Mm,
there's a lot of purity testing out there, right? That if you're not 100% pure, then any initiative you do good is thereby tainted. And a lot of times it's difficult for companies to do that. Like, for instance, Petro Canada is an oil company. A lot of people think all oil companies are by definition evil. And yet at the same time, you can't write with a plastic pen without having somebody produce the plastic, which comes from oil. And so you're doing a really good initiative. And Petro-Canada is actually an interesting one. I have another friend who does innovation work who was in Petro-Canada, and people were like deeply passionate about doing good things. But you're dealing with, like, how much sensitivity is there in your brand for who you work with, where people may criticize just because of the industry somebody plays in without looking deeper into both the necessity of that company and just some of the tensions that exist. Like, it's very difficult to be pure in all parts of your business. Any business of scale is going to have something that you're going to be able to criticize.
100%. And in fact, that goes, also even for not-for-profit organizations that are, you can't say they're all perfect either. I think it goes with the territory of just, basic ethics. It's not all nearly what it should be, obviously. Now, that being said, of course, there's certain things that, we think very carefully about who we want to work with. And even in industries that are, that people wouldn't target in that way. Because our kind of bottom line is we genuinely only want to work with people who want to make change in a meaningful way. So it could be industries that you wouldn't think of as being, like, I don't know, unethical, but still they might not be committed to it in a real way, because there's still so much kind of performative work in this area of people who are what I called in this book, in my book, CSR light, which is, people who are doing basically as little as possible to be seen.
CSR meaning corporate social responsibility.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of that. And, whether it's CSR light or DEI light, or like, there's just a lot of lightness in here. And there's a lot of businesses that are really just trying to sort of skate through this and get as much value and visibility as possible by not doing too much.
Now, how do you, like, what kind of filter do you apply, or is it more just a subjective feel? Like, how do you make that determination as to whether this is somebody greenwashing or something to that effect versus sincerely caring about a particular initiative?
Yeah, part of it is what they've already been doing in this space or in spaces that are related to this, so the actions obviously speak louder than words. So we look very carefully at what they've done so far. We look very carefully at the degree to which leaders are committed to this, because if leaders are not committed, as we were saying before, this kind of thing, generally doesn't happen, and then it becomes very much more of a kind of tactical, transactional thing, which is something that is not stuff that we're interested in working on. Like, you could also there is a subjective part of it too, I guess you'd say, which is, you can tell at this point quite quick for us, at this point, reasonably quickly, about whether people are actually genuinely wanting to do this in a meaningful way or not. The other thing is also the amount of resources that people have dedicated to this. Sometimes, like, it does, in terms of time and money, like, this is something that is not going to be a quick, it's not like a 6-week project and somehow there's going to be some remarkable outcome. This doesn't work that way. And another thing that we have found is absolutely it's just become central, and we think it's just absolutely fundamental to doing this, to bringing social change to large businesses, is the degree to which people understand that it has to be from outside of their offices. Like, large corporations don't understand generally about the kinds of social issues that are out in the world that need to be solved. They just don't. And it's not their fault. And because they're very good at certain things. But if you're looking at a list of, say, the 17 SDGs and trying to really understand specifics of what needs to be done.
I'm just going to stop you this, because I always like to define acronyms, because not everybody knows what they are. So the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals articulated by the United Nations.
Thank you. That, again, you see, I say this is my bad. I assume everybody knows that, which people obviously don't. They should. So, corporations can't be expected to know this kind of thing. And corporations can't, no one ought to be making important decisions about about issues like this that need to be solved without gaining the input of people who have actually experienced those problems and issues. So it's involving people with lived experience of homelessness, of poverty, of other things that we're focused on helping, or in the case of agriculture, actually going and talking to farmers or whatever it is, so it's very much of kind of balancing, getting a perspective, a really authentic and genuine and accurate perspective from an external point of view, with other things that are internally important too, like how employees are engaged and how it aligns strategically with other business priorities.
And do you I imagine having, because you've been doing this work since what, 2001?
Yes, we have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a fair length of time. So I imagine, your work sounds pretty creative. I can't imagine that around the lunchroom in your office that you all don't just come up with ideas of your own. So does your work, is it companies come to you saying, we want to do an initiative and we want to engage you? Or do you have like a file folder of really cool ideas and you say, who I think would be a great company to do this idea? Let's take it to them.
Well, it's a bit of both. But we've actually taken it one step further than what you just said, is that there's actually 2 or 3 very large social change initiatives that we've done basically on our own and without the involvement. Like, we haven't gone to, a client or something and said this, or tried to find a client, but we've just come across things that seem so important that we put them together ourselves, so we're kind of in our own way walking the talk as well. Like, we created, we saw the need, we saw that there were so many young people who were out of work and could be employed, and some of those young people were homeless and some vulnerable in other ways. And so we actually created a national platform called Higher Up, got support from the federal government, created this platform, built relationships with organizations and business, youth serving organizations and businesses across Canada, and the platform connected youth to entry-level jobs at these corporations. And it was an amazing undertaking. And ultimately, actually, the other thing that we did was, because we were so committed to, in addition to advising other people, to actually making change ourselves. That's exactly why we created the Impact Foundation for Social Change, our own foundation, which I started in 2019. And yeah, well, and that's it's. I'm so I don't know what the right word is. It feels so grateful that we started it, and I'm so proud of the work that they do. And the foundation exists to basically create success for newcomers and refugees to Canada. And the foundation has its own team. There's a wonderful executive director named Fatima Al Hosseini, and she's built this amazing team. And they're doing work with refugees and newcomers, which is just extraordinarily important. That's all I can say.
I remember, I don't know if you knew this, there was a gentleman, I think he was in charge of Danby Appliances. And when the Syrian refugees were coming, I actually met with him and we had a really interesting conversation, because his approach to it was, this is a business problem. Mm-hmm. And he says, he committed to helping 100 people settle. And I remember him saying, if any of those people are not fully employed and self-sustaining at the end of that 1-year period, I have failed. And I just thought it was just this beautiful, it isn't just getting people into the country, but he looked at the entire ecosystem of how someone in, acculturated, employed, housed, everything. and built the infrastructure around that. I remember thinking I just loved hearing this like real business guy listening to this thing as like taking a social cause, looking at it as a business problem that required logistical solutions. And it was really smart.
It's so smart. And, it just shows the power of, like, people don't generally think about this. When they think, okay, well, as I said, businesses and corporations don't usually understand social issues and the complexity of them. But sometimes you've got a situation like this where somebody goes really deep and and actually is applying the things that they have learned as a business to solving social problems. And I think that's just fantastic. And there's so much space for that kind of thinking. And the reality is that, going back to those 17 SDGs, there's a target for solving those SDGs by 2030. And we're pretty far away, despite the all great actions of many different, organizations in different sectors, not-for-profits, charities, and other kinds of things. We haven't gotten far enough, towards solving those problems. And we believe that business like this one at Danby can actually make a significant difference by applying some of the skills and knowledge and experience that leaders like that have to some of these problems. I think that there was a great article in the Globe and Mail a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, about that was advocating for business people to be involved in politics more. I thought that was super interesting. And we ourselves are creating a group of business leaders that are involved in social change. And because I think there's such a gap between the people like that and the experience and opportunity that exists to harness stuff like that with, against really big important issues in this country and beyond. But it's not. There isn't a place for that. It doesn't really exist.
And I wanted to ask you about the business, but I want to touch on one thing about that I think is worthy of a discussion, which is sort of the political context in which those things happen now. Like at one time, if a company took on a cause, it was like, okay, that's their cause, that's a nice thing. But now there's so much criticizing and oversight and looking for the thing to go wrong. And yet, some companies stick to their guns, like Nike did the thing with Colin Kaepernick, and just stuck with it. And it worked out well for them because you could see it was values aligned, and this is who we are, and this is what we stand for. And others have tried to do initiatives, and then they get criticized and back off, and then that just makes them look terrible all throughout. But from the people you're speaking to, like there is an understandable tension, right? Like if I'm the, I don't know, the CEO or the head of a department of a major corporation and it's publicly traded, I've got a responsibility to produce returns for my shareholders. And there's something I really want to I care deeply about, but there's a risk that if I do something, it's going to have a negative brand impact. So then everybody turns into cowards and don't take on the big social change initiatives that I agree with you that we need more players in the ecosystem taking on. Like, do you have conversations with people about those things, and where are their heads at around it?
Well, yeah, it is. And people, and this in the States, of course, more than here, but it's here too. And, we live in an increasingly polarized, political climate, and it's not going to go away anytime soon, sadly. So maybe it's sort of self-selecting in a way because of the kinds of people we talk to. Like we're generally not talking to people who are not kind of, the people we talk to have businesses that are really values-driven businesses, I would say, as are we. So we're probably not talking to, we're not talking to a gun manufacturer or something. We're not talking to people who are on one side of it. But even that's complicated because there's a lot of people who are progressive people, or some people who would say they're progressive in the US who might also, support the right to access guns. So it's incredibly complex is the answer right now.
Right.
But basically, it's a values based decision that has to be made. And there are some companies, unfortunately, that are paralyzed because they don't have, I think it's because they don't have a solid enough value set themselves internally to actually make a decision to stand for something.
Hmm.
And that's what it's about. Yes, so you're going to stand for something, and is there the possibility that you're going to alienate some people? Yeah, there is, but there's also the possibility that you're going to have much stronger relationships with the people who are aligned with the decision that you've made that's based on your values. I was just at a rally yesterday, actually, downtown here, and there's a woman, I just can't remember. I don't remember her name, but she was an amazing person, and she started this incredible pizza company in California. I forgot the name of it. And she was talking about the fact that, people are on, and she's got a big social media presence, and she was talking about people who, she gets a lot of pushback for decisions that she's made in terms of social issues. She said, I don't care. And I thought, that's what it should be, like that's leadership.
Hmm.
Leadership is not, not making a decision, you know, like I
It's
don't buy.
having certain criteria. One of the reasons I love working with entrepreneurs um, is around whether it's a social cause or whether it's I just want to keep people employed or I want to pay people. Like I've got a few clients who basically they've got a personal, like really passionate desire to make it that every one of their employees gets to buy a home.
Hmm,
Like there's no business benefit to that. They just
yeah,
like I love my people and I want them to do that. And they're willing to say, I make a lot of money. I can take a smaller margin. If my competitor has a higher margin than me, I don't care
yeah.
because this is the value thing that's important to me. Whereas in public companies, there's a lot more pressure to say if you're not maintaining your margins or hitting certain share returns, there's some negative consequence to you as the leader or decision maker.
For sure, it's harder in a public corporation. But there's also, there's more and more scrutiny. I mean, I guess you'd say there's more and more scrutiny on both sides of it. And there's certainly a lot of pushback in the ESG, environment, social governance space. There's been a lot of discussion about whether that's the right thing. A lot of people don't think that, they would just think that's taking away from share value. And
Mhm.
so that's something. And that's a real thing that a lot of corporations are dealing with. However, all you can do, like we can't, none of us can really solve that problem. All
Right.
we can do is do what we believe is the right thing for ourselves and for the people we work with. And yeah, so I guess there's a divide on this, and I'm sure that
Yeah.
there's lots of businesses that I don't believe are doing the right thing. I think that there's must be aligned with other people who agree with that, with they've got a different set of values. That's not my set of values, but I can't change that. All I can do is continue to advance the basic belief that we have, which is that businesses can contribute to solving social problems. And that's the mission. That's
And where did so I can see some people listening to us, and here's two old white guys making it sound as if it's something easy. But you started this in the trenches like quite a while ago. I think at the time there was like Ben and Jerry's the Body Shop. It wasn't as prevalent. Like what had you move into this space, and how difficult was it to start? Because you were sort of treading some new territory.
Well, again, it's in hindsight, it was very easy because I was very naive. I truly had no idea how hard it would be. That's like any business, right?
Yeah.
And but I think, like, and honestly, there's, like I was saying before, you have to understand what problem you're solving, you know. And I uh, I actually didn't follow that advice myself. I think because arguably there really was not a problem very much at the time. This was very much of something because people didn't even know. Like at the time, I was trying to connect with people, and at the time it was calling people and trying to find out who at a large business was responsible for this area, and people had no idea what I was talking about, and it was really a grind, you know, because it was because people didn't see it as a problem or an opportunity, honestly. It was really just nothing. But
what did you like? What was the thing that made you go, "Oh, this is a great idea"?
well, I saw some things that I thought were very inspirational to me. And one of them was Ben and Jerry's. Another one was the Body Shop at the time. And I had I just had this sort of belief that this was something that was going to become more and more important. I wasn't actually thinking too much about at the time, like that was before the SDGs. I wasn't exactly thinking about solving social problems as we do now. It wasn't that big a vision. It was just like, well, like businesses and not-for-profit organizations could really better work together to, to help some of these issues in a way that was good for them.
Mhm.
And I had some experience to validate that this was actually possible and that was a good thing to do. And that there were companies that starting to be like Ben Jerry's or the Body Shop and a few others that were starting to lean into this. And there weren't that many, but it was enough for me at least to really, believe that because I had sort of corporate and social change experience, and I just thought I could help bring this together. I didn't have too much of a plan, like I really did not. And it wasn't too much more than that. I thought, well,
You must have
I
had some perseverance though to stick with it.
absolutely, again, like any new business, and that's the thing. You've got to have that sort of combination of a real belief and passion in what you're doing, and a very strong stomach, because it doesn't it is the significant ups and downs, and when the downs happen, that's when people quit.
Right.
But I didn't. I was too far into it. Like I was just I was just I was I'm for some reason I just got it in me. I'm very, very determined. Once I've decided to do something, I just I can't let it go. And I just kept on doing it. There were times I thought we were gonna have to sell our house, and I just was really at the bottom. Um, but climbing out of that kind of thing for entrepreneurs just in general, it just gives you a different kind of voice in what you do. You just
Mhm.
can't get that another way. So much has been written about, the need for failure and that people don't learn from winning. And that's obviously both those things I in my own experience, are very true. Um, and but it is really once all I can say again for me is it's just the way you talk. Once you've experienced this stuff, you have a kind of authority within yourself
Mhm.
that just wasn't there before. And it's just what it is, you know.
Yeah. It's actually interesting when you talk to a lot of VCs and investors,
Mm.
uh, that that idea that somebody has fallen and gotten back up again is
Mhm.
actually one of the qualities that investors look for.
Sure, it's resilience, because it's what's that guy's name? Seth
Godin?
Godin. He's that thing.
Yeah.
He has that great book called, I think it's called The Dip. Have you
Yeah.
read that? It's a great book, and it basically says, people start businesses and it's successful at the beginning, often a little bit, and then it goes down. And then that's when people quit. That it's when you make it through the dip that business becomes successful, and that's because you learn so much about what happened, and we all face these dips. It's that's not just one. I mean, you're like, as any business person will tell you, right? There's always a wall in front of you. There's always something, and you're always like, okay, well, how do I get around this or over it, or find a different wall or whatever. And the times that there's no wall, there's just very, very few,
Right.
you know.
100%. Yeah, there's somebody else. I can't remember who wrote this, but it was really interesting. It's not exactly the same, but he said, one of the great things is the answer to the question, how do you play the second half? And it wasn't
Mhm.
second half of life. It was The analogy was in a basketball game. If you've gotten smoked, like there's basically no chance of winning this game.
Mhm.
When you come out from the locker room at the end of the to start the second half, how do you play? How do you show up?
Mhm.
And if you still show up playing to win, even though you know you can't, like that's the character thing that's going to sustain you in the next game.
Totally. And it has to do with some sense of optimism, of just perpetual optimism, that and belief. And again, I don't know, you can't really teach that. Some people have got that, and but it's something that's so fundamentally important, right? And it's
Now,
like,
with that, I'm curious about one part of your business model. And you and I spoke a little bit about this before, but not with respect to your business model. I'm wondering how your clients perceive this, because the clients you're talking to, the Petro cans and the big organizations, they're used to engaging consultants.
Mhm.
And consultants for large corporations charge certain dollar rates and fees and this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Given that you're in there um, helping them do good in the world, there's two versions of this. Some people say, well, because this is all about doing good in the world, you should help us by charging us less money. Versus the thing I always say is that if you are not only helping solve a business problem, but you're also doing something socially good in a market system that's supposed to exchange value for value, you should be receiving more value rather than less because you're putting more value into the world.
Mhm. Mhm.
How does that play out in your business model?
Well,
And how do clients experience that?
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like our clients, and I think about I don't know, the first thing that came to mind for me is that, our clients are working, the sort of consultants, say, and advisors that they have are very often the biggest players in the world, like McKinsey's and PwC's and Deloitte's and so on. And that's great. Those people are amazing at what they do, and there's a lot of things that those organizations and charge, a lot of money for those things. We're not like in that category in terms of the fees that we charge, not nearly. But in the space that we are in, I can't say anything like all those organizations do great work for what they do. In our space, though, we are like 100% pure in terms of our focus and mission, in terms of bringing social change to large corporations. And because we've done it ourselves, we're like, everyone talks about being authentic, right? Well, I actually genuinely believe that we are. Like, it's just what it is.
Right.
And so yes, but what is that worth? I personally happen to believe that making the world a better place and aligning a business with doing that is worth a lot.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
agree.
And so again, it is what it is. But as I said, in terms of partly as you're saying, like what I've experienced in the very beginning, like 20 years ago, this was worth virtually nothing, in the minds of organizations of the kinds of people we were working for, because they hadn't identified a problem. They didn't see any opportunity here. There was no budget for it. Like, there were so many reasons not to do it. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like kind of like this sort of sideline thing that was like, so marginal, nobody cared about it. It wasn't serious business.
Right.
Um, but as we've seen the business case for this being, built over and over and over again, and continuing to be even more important from the perspective of the folks that I was talking about earlier, and whether that's employees, shareholders, customers, and the media and lots of others. Like, it's something that the conversation around this is completely different. Now, it's still not to say that because of some of the things that we've talked about, it's not like I wouldn't say that people are rushing or, are kind of, rushing to pay huge amounts of money to do this kind of work. It's still in a situation where the whole sort of CSR, social change for business space, is very much, it's far from mature. We're still building this, and but the good news is that, also coming back to when I started, I thought I was being so smart, because there was almost nobody else who was doing this work. And I thought, perfect, I can see this is going to be important. There's nobody else doing it. It'll be great. But of course I was wrong, because there was no one wanted to pay for it. So there was no one else. Now, of course, competition is a good thing, because there's a market for something. And so to me, as I saw more and more people who would be considered competitors coming into this world, I was thinking, this is the greatest thing, because now it actually means substantiating that there is value here,
Yeah.
So I continue to be grateful for everyone who's working in the same space as we are, honestly.
And just before we finish up, tell us about the book, Change for Good. What's it about? Who's it for?
Change for Good. Well, there it is. Change for Good. It is about exactly what we're talking about. But at the heart of it, I guess, is the sort of insight that I mentioned before, which is that still, this area has become ubiquitous, and yet there's still the majority of businesses doing this in a way which is quite performative, which is doing this just enough to be seen to be socially responsible. So what I wanted to do was to kind of add up the experiences that I have had in helping corporations move past that point, move from doing what I called CSR light to actually making what this book calls Change for Good, which is really all about many of the things we've already spoken about. And to look at that in a way against a whole lot of different aspects of business that are important, including engaging employees, engaging shareholders, differentiating from customers and from competitors, and so on. And also, so I wanted to share the experiences that we've had in all these different areas. So it's quite personal in a lot of ways, but also have tools that businesses could use to make it practical. So I didn't want to just be talking about stuff. I wanted to actually share tools that we use, so that everyone else could have access to those same things and they could do it on their own.
Nice.
Yeah.
And when did it publish?
That was published in 2022. Yeah, in the middle of COVID.
And just for our, is there content in there that would be helpful for entrepreneurs who are wanting to figure out how to do some good?
For sure. And I think it's anyone in business, no matter what you're doing now, I think this would be useful for. I think it's also useful for people in the not-for-profit and government.
Like a good book salesman.
Yeah. Well, that's a new thing for me, but I think all I can say is that this is the world's worst thing. It's like when you hear yourself in a recording in your voice and you think, oh, that doesn't sound very good. Imagine having a whole book which is like that, and you're thinking, what is this? Who wants to listen to this? But I think the very nice thing is that people I really like and respect have been very encouraging and have endorsed this and are using it. So that's nothing better than that. That feels so good. And just the fact that that this can help other people in a way that we can't always directly do ourselves, it just makes me so happy.
Right. And so what's next for Impact Corp?
Oh, more of the same. We stay on the same mission, really. But I think that the main thing is that our model is, we recognize that we are not for everybody, nor do we want to be. So our model is working very closely with a relatively small number of large organizations that really want to make transformational change. We continue to do that.
And how long do you think you're going to keep doing it for a long time?
Well, I personally, in one way or another, I can't ever stop this. It's like a personal,
It's like a mission.
mission, or yeah, it is like a mission for me. And but we also have a great team, and who will continue this regardless of my involvement. But I'm still going to be leading the charge and advocating for this and evangelizing for it, and being involved in things directly as well. So I'm not yeah, like it's just not, I don't ever, like, what would I do? I mean, the only thing I could do is, like, I love playing guitar. So that would be the only thing that I could do. I don't really have anything else. So I'm fully in, but backed up by an amazing group of people who bring so much more to it in lots of ways than I ever could.
You must attract very passionate people to a business like this.
Yeah, we do, and that's another joy, right? I mean, it's great, and like we say in business, you always want to hire people who are smarter than you are, you know, and I very much believe that, and really try to do that, always. And I can genuinely say all the people who are working with me are, unquestionably much smarter than I am, but they're also so much more, so committed in their own way and so passionate about all this stuff, that's like, that's to see that, to be able to create an opportunity for a smart person to really live into what they're passionate about is like the world's greatest feeling.
Yeah. What a gift to yourself and to them.
Totally. And I always said, like, again, you think about leadership. Well, what does leadership really mean? It means creating opportunities for other people.
Last two questions. What's one personal quality that you most had to improve or overcome to succeed?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think I think that I think trying to bring. I think I tend to be very interested in a lot of different things. Like, I'm not a conventional business person. I'm all kinds of different things, I think. So I think that trying to find a way to sort of harness all that stuff for the purpose of this business took a while.
And what's one personal quality that most contributed to your success?
Maybe the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes being a bit of a polymath is useful in a consulting style of business.
Yeah, well, we're in a business where we're largely inventing as we go, So there are people who have come to work with Impact who are like real solid business people that have not worked out. People who have come, they're social change people, that hasn't always worked out. But it's people who can bring all this stuff together that have the ability to bring creativity to kind of discipline the business thinking, that I find to be, when people do that, it's like, oh, that's what's amazing. There's a guy who was working with us now who in school did computer science and philosophy. Perfect example,
Nice.
And
Yeah.
and I guess I'm a little bit like that myself, because I have this music thing, and I never went to business school, and so I've tried to I've had to invent this whole thing. It didn't really exist, 2001. So but we're still inventing, and I personally love that. Like, I would be, and maybe that's another kind of another answer to your question, which is I'm bored pretty easily. Like, I'm not, you have a system that needs to be run. I'm not your guy for that.
Right.
I'm interested in inventing the thing, but not running it.
I hear you. That's what makes entrepreneurship fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen, where can people find you?
Well, the website, no one says that anymore, impactcorp.com. And it's IMPAKTCORP.com. And if you're interested in the Impact Foundation, I encourage everyone to do it, which is, as I said, I'm so passionate about that. And the work of the foundation, which is impactfoundation.ca. They've got this great resources there too. Those are the best ways, or LinkedIn or anywhere. Forbes, it's another thing too. I've been writing about leadership for Forbes. So if you look up my name with Forbes, you'll find all kinds of articles there.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been a great, fascinating conversation.
Yeah. But the book is also Amazon or anywhere else you could get this.
The last thing I was going to say is where can we get the book?
Yep.
Amazon, is it Indigo and Barnes and Noble and all that?
All of them. Yep.
Right on. Well, good luck with that. I'm looking forward to reading it myself.
Great. Thank you. What a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Cheers.